Good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen for presentation here. And can you all see that? Okay. So going off of what we said, we're going to be talking about how do we use sustainability to find common ground, and what are the ways that we can take and build off of what we just heard from the last session and incorporate that to really move the needle. So as mentioned, I run the firm Sustainable Business Consulting. We have about 195 different companies across 40 different industries we've worked in, including pets. Just a little FYI, I've loved and owned 4 dogs over my time, and Katie from my team has got 2 dogs right now, and she'll be talking. So what we're going to talk about, today is the fact that we are in such a divided and polarized society, and it seems like people have really found themselves in 2 camps, and they're not really willing to listen to anyone who doesn't share their exact beliefs or somebody from the other side. And so we're going to really unpack and use this workshop to discover how we can use sustainability to bring people together, just in the same way that pets do. And we want to address some of the sustainability challenges that you all are facing in your organizations by actually applying and learning some of these skills on how to talk to the other side. So just to get a sense of who's in the room and how best to kind of answer the questions, we're going to throw up this quick poll, and I'm going to hand it over to Becky and Katie, who will manage the poll. But we want to know, what is your role within your company? What are you currently struggling with? And, do you feel more hopeful today than you did at this time last year, pre-COVID? And so Becky and Katie, I'm going to hand it to you to run the poll. And what we want everyone to do is just to quickly answer so we have the ideas, and then we'll get back into the rest of the workshop. This should take no more than 2 or 3, 4 minutes.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks so much for listing that poll. Caitlin here. I'd be happy to read off the results to you. They're coming in now. It looks like in the room we have about, the numbers are changing pretty quickly here. Let me just wait for 1 more minute as people are answering. All right, it's about an even split between executive leadership and staff members. And then we've also got a 25% of attendees that are sustainability directors or directly responsible for sustainability in some way, whether that's a manager or CSR. And then we also have about 10% that are green team members.
Okay, great. And so for this next question, we want to ask, and of course this is going to vary based on that breakdown. What are you struggling with right now in terms of sustainability or your various CSR efforts within your organization?
Great question, Kevin. So while they're all coming in, I'm looking, there's quite a few options for answers today, and I'm going to give you guys just a few more minutes to enter in your responses. So again, the question is, what sustainability struggle are you dealing with right now? All right, let's take a look. It's so fun watching this change in real time, but let's see. So the biggest one is really gaining traction and support. About 32% of people, that's their biggest struggle. So that's where we see the most. The second highest one here is insufficient resources, time and funding. And actually that one is starting to take the lead. So the top 2, Kevin, are gaining traction and support, as well as insufficient resources, time, or funding.
Great. Those are pretty typical. And then, the question that I have here is, do you feel more hopeful today than you did this time last year? But let's actually just make it a shorter time horizon, because I think that, a year ago, pre-COVID, it was a totally different world. So let's just say, do you feel more hopeful now today than you did 3 months ago? And if so, why?
All right, so just as a reminder, everyone, you have to click on the polls button in order to see the question. The question is, do you feel more hopeful today than you did yesterday? Now, yesterday was a pretty great day. Let's remember, Impact Unleashed started yesterday. So yesterday was pretty hopeful. Do you feel more hopeful today than yesterday? That was a really great presentation we just had. Let's see. Results are coming in. Wow. Okay. 82% yes. People feel
Great.
more hopeful today than yesterday.
That's awesome. Well, and Caitlin, you can see everything on my screen, correct, right now, these poll questions?
I can. I can
Great.
see everything.
Awesome.
You're doing great.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for that feedback, and I'm glad people are feeling more hopeful, and I think all of us should be. But the reality is, we're obviously in an incredibly divided political time. We have, the greatest sources of income inequality probably we've ever had. I mean, and socially, we have a complete disconnect between half of the country that believes in social distancing and half that won't. And of course, and we just spent this last time talking about JEDI and diversity, equity, inclusion. And, there's still incredible divisions that we know. But one of the best things that's coming out of this, and just building off that last poll question, is there is a lot of hope. And, one of the things we found is when writing the book and the work that we're doing is that just like pets bring people together, sustainability is an opportunity to unify. It's a way of finding common ground. It's a way of bringing, ideas and innovation together, because you can talk about ways to find cost savings. You can engage employees. You can enhance your brand. You can build business value, all while saving the planet and acting more socially just. So I wrote the book along with my colleague Natalie Hoffman. They came out in late May, because we felt that during a time of coronavirus, recession, issues like climate change and DEI we're not going to be paying attention to, as things like the coronavirus and politics were taking over our lives. And we really wanted to put a playbook together, because I think so often in this industry or any industry, when we talk about sustainability, we all know how to talk to the people that get it, that believe with us. But a lot of us are really lacking the skills, or even wanting to reach out to people who are completely against this. If you want to take action on climate change, it's really difficult to put yourself in a room of climate deniers and listen to them empathetically. If you are a Democrat, it's really hard to sit with, say, someone who's a Trump supporter right now and who says that the election was a fraud. But the reality is that if we get rid of the noise, that there's a way together, because there's more that actually unites us, as we all know, than divides us. And sustainability is one of those ways that we're going to use this, not only to tell people, but how to listen to people who don't share our viewpoint. So let's just start kind of at the basic level, that if you're talking to an individual, we all share kind of the same things. People want financial stability. They want a good job. They want a healthy and safe family. They want to live in a safe community with good schools. And, what we can talk about when we get within business is, for the executives in the room who might be, having to try and convince skeptical board members or skeptical investors or analysts, about why they're doing different sustainability initiatives, they have to be able to show that financial win-win. For those of you who are CSR directors on the green team, you have to try and convince people, how can you help them achieve their goal in a way that will help you achieve there. And I always say, let's start with a shared interest. Start by thinking about what the other person cares about. I think one of the problems within not only the pet industry, but within all industries, is that we all start with, let's convince the other side while I'm right. Let me tell them why they need to change their viewpoints. But instead, if we think about it, whether you're talking to an investor who may be caring only about, the financial bottom line, or you might be talking to a facilities manager who only wants to know how to run their building better. Or you might be talking to a supplier who, is helping you with a pet product or a food product. By putting yourself in their shoes and how what you want to offer can help solve their problem, then that helps break down the barriers. And what I always tell people is if you can also tie financial or money to this, money is one of those things that's not ideological and can break down barriers. So let's focus on some of those win-win solutions. And we're gonna do some scenario modeling, and Katie's gonna throw a question for each one of these three different scenarios. But from what you all just answered in terms of what some of the challenges you're facing are, you know, insufficient funding, time, money, and gaining traction. So let's talk about the first one. I think it blows me away that we're still having to, quote, make the business case for sustainability. If you have insufficient funding, which a lot of you said was one of your dominant things in the poll, or you might be getting pushback from finance for budgets for next year because they're worried about the economic uncertainty. Then you have to, really kind of say, let's find those different means to get to an end. So one of the techniques that we've been working with a number of our clients is how can you use sustainability to solve many people's problems all at the same time. So for those of you who are in the executive leadership space, you're talking to your investor relations people, or your shareholders all the time. And what we found with companies within the Pet Sustainability Coalition, or even large Fortune 100 companies, is that investor relations people typically don't deal with sustainability stuff. They get these questionnaires that are coming to them from all of these things in the right-hand column, whether it's Bloomberg or SASB or the SEC guidelines, or they might get a request from a customer who says, can you fill out ISS or EcoVadis or MSCI? As a private equity investor, has now said that they will only invest in firms that are taking action on ESG issues. And even, coming off of what we just heard from the Jedi presentation, the NASDAQ, on Tuesday said that they no longer list companies that don't have actual diversity actions taking place within the next few years. So this is a way that you can talk about it kind of from a risk perspective to them. Whereas accounting and finance, who may say, well, we don't have money for this. Your job is to show them where sustainability can save money, where it can lead to top line revenue growth. And so for those of you who are CSR directors or green teams, a lot of times it's very easy to walk around and find allies within an organization that can tell you where they see money that can be saved. And more often than not, it's an environmentally beneficial way at the same time. And obviously for the executives, you love the cost savings, but you really love if you can find top line revenue growth. And I think that's where you can be partnering with your marketing and sales team, because if marketing is saying, well, you know what, we list our green attributes in our products, but consumers just aren't buying it, because it's eco or socially just. They buy it on price, aesthetic, what our pets need. But if you can differentiate it, you can not only continue to sell more within your existing line, but you might even be able to sell into new markets and sell new products. So one of the things that for the executives who are listening, I think one of the things that needs to be really debunked is there's always been this thought that you can't do sustainability because it costs more and it doesn't provide the same level of return on investment. The reality is that's completely wrong. If you look at these two indices, the Dow Jones Sustainability Index has actually outperformed the Dow Jones Industrial Average over the last 3 to 5 years. And if you look at it over a longer horizon, over 16 or 20 years, it's done better prior, coming off of 9/11, prior to the last economic recession, coming after this huge stock market run-up that we had right before COVID. And the S&P Environmental and Socially Responsible Index has outperformed the S&P 500. So anybody who makes this argument that we're not focused on this is missing it. And it's all shown up. And this is numbers. This is not, me as a sustainability consultant telling you about how it's smart to save the planet, or it's a good thing to be more socially just or racially, just. It's saying this is better for you from the financial bottom line. So let's look at a case study kind of on the business value of sustainability. So Westpaw, they used the B Corp assessment or the B Impact assessment. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, B Corp is obviously one of the top leading organizations and ways to describe your company and really certify your company as living up to everything that was coming off of the last session. What are you doing socially? What are you doing from a diversity, equity, inclusion perspective? What are you doing for climate and sustainability within your operations? And they use the assessment to evaluate what sustainable efforts not only could they do, but which ones provided the best dollar per investment. What was the best ROI? And they developed KPIs off of that, and the results were pretty awesome. Now, Wispa isn't a giant Fortune 500 company, but by focusing on sustainability impact assessment, they were able to find about $45,000 in cost savings just by reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. They reduced their energy emissions by 80% and their waste emissions by about 9%. And they were able to save the equivalent of taking 385,000 cars off the road. So this is a way that, if you have skeptics within your organization, you can use some of these case studies and examples to build that business case. Now, we had an organization. Now, this isn't with a pet, but I just want to do this. For any of you who've ever bought or rented a video from Redbox or had your coins at the grocery store captured, this is a company called Outerwalm, and they were receiving external pressure about all these questionnaires they were getting from Walmart, from Safeway, from other organizations to report on their energy, GHG, and sustainability performance. They didn't have a formal plan. As we heard in the last session, they only had one person who had just been appointed in their job. So our firm, we worked with them on developing a 3-year strategy. But what we did was by doing that first initial sustainability assessment, we started by where can they do better from a social justice perspective? Where can they do better from an environmental perspective? And we quickly identified over $1.3 million in potential savings. So this was a way that they could quickly, whether there was ideology or resistance from anybody within the organization, they could say, look, we're in an economic downturn. Here's a way we can save money. And then they were able to then align and scale the initiatives, in terms of what they were doing with this, that showed that there was cost savings. It was a way of enhancing their brand value by engaging and working on these sustainability things. And it was a way of engaging their employees. We heard it. Another one was, gaining traction. One of the, it's obviously easier to gain traction internally within your organization, but how do you engage your suppliers and vendors? Because we all know you need vendors and suppliers to really help you along your path. You can be doing the work, but if your supply chain isn't helping you out, it just makes everything so much more difficult. And what we heard in the last session was the African proverb of, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, you need to go together. So one of the things that we advise a lot of organizations, especially within your industry, is you want to speak in terms that are aligned with your suppliers and vendors' best interests, not just your own. So while it's great, you want to tell them, hey, we're trying to advance our sustainability efforts and we want you to join in this. If you were to say, we would love to buy more of your goods and services, and if you can improve your kind of environmental and sustainability performance to help us do that, we will put more money in your pocket. That is a totally different way that they will hear it. And so, we hear all the time from suppliers that, they say, well, I'm too busy for this. I'm just trying to fill orders, especially right now. Everyone is so hyper-focused on delivery before the holidays. But if you can show them that, you can help them not only, by giving them a differentiator, but you can help them find some efficiencies. You can work with them to lower their own emissions impacts. There's just a way that they're going to hear you differently and a way that you're going to gain more traction. A lot of vendors, especially small companies or if they're overseas, they obviously, don't have the resources to dedicate to that. And one of the things you can do, and especially those of you who are CSR directors or executives, that if you go at it from a partnership perspective, we found so many organizations. I'll just use an example with a paper company where one of our clients was able just to say, hey, look, could you give us 100% recycled at the same cost you give us the normal? And they said, we can't. They said, well, what if we just made a 2-year commitment to you instead of a 1-year commitment, so you have price certainty and you can build that in your budget? And they said, actually, we can. And so this was a way that, by just working with them and finding out where their real pain point or their touch point was, you could work together to really engage your suppliers. And, I think that, as was mentioned in the last session, just by engaging your suppliers and your vendors in some of these other issues, you can find it. I mean, they were saying that, you know, by engaging, people in a more diverse way, bringing more stakeholders into the discussion, and certainly your suppliers and vendors can do that, that they saw 20% more revenue growth. So if you can engage your supply chain and think of them as an extension of your business in a way that you can additionally green and bring more social justice to your business, you're going to have better business results. And here's just an example of Mom's Organic Market. Now you may be wondering, why am I pointing out this market when we're talking about pets? Well, they engage with a lot of the existing suppliers that were pet sustainability members. And what they did was they developed a supplier questionnaire based on kind of brand promise to their customers. And so it ensured that there was minimum sustainability standards that would inform, purchasing decisions. What happened was members of the Pet Sustainability Coalition really responded to this. About 63% did. They were able, and this helped, Moms Organic and the Pet Sustainability Coalition identify a more diverse pool of engaged suppliers. It helped them increase customer loyalty by, demonstrating their commitment, and able to kind of extend its brand power promise to educate its own supplier base. So the third scenario kind of goes back to how do you gain traction and how do you lead to that? As we're looking at one of the things I always tell organizations is, look across the entire organization. Like we started with investor relations, we started with accounting and finance, but as you look at marketing and PR, marketing is always looking for different ways to talk about what they're doing. PR is always looking for, give me some stories that I can put out there in the media and the press. But you've got some people who may or may not be skeptical on your team, or people on the other side who are saying, this is something that customers don't care about. Now, we know from what we heard yesterday that this absolutely is something that customers care about, especially Gen X, Gen Z, millennials, etc. But one of the things is we have to not make assumptions. Sometimes people's interests aren't necessarily defined by their income, their gender, the political party. And so, sometimes we tell organizations that we're working with, when they're taking a proactive step on climate change, or they're coming out with really strong DEI guidelines that they're gonna put out there. And one of the, we hear some pushback from the PR says, hey, look, with climate change, we just don't want to alienate anybody. The reality is that sustainability does extend beyond kind of political party lines. Because if you start by talking about what everyone wants with clean air, clean water, healthier homes, I mean, I think what we heard from the very last session is you heard the woman from from Colorado was saying, we had horrible wildfires. And the person in California saying, we had horrible wildfires too. We had the same thing up here in Washington. And if you start talking with them about how you can start solving some of those issues and addressing those concerns, you have an ability to do this. And of course, marketing, they're sometimes, a little bit, you're skeptics. It may not be with, the audience here, but we find that a lot of times, marketing individuals have kind of tried and true ways that they know how to reach out to people. And if they're not, saying that their customers, care about this, they're not, going to actually move on it. But, it's one thing to show them all the stats about how this is increasingly important with customers. But what we found is that if you can show them a materiality assessment and actually go through a program like that and find ways that you can collaboratively bring the industry together to kind of lift all boats and find ways to bring in, more revenue and more press to the organization, they'll get on board with it. They just, unless they can see that people are buying with it and hard results, they sometimes can be a little more skeptical on us. So, one idea, and this was an example of, Yora Foods, where they decided, like, hey, we really want to, we've got an amazing product, but let's create a PR campaign that can actually create a social movement. Let's bring people together. And so, they had, they had their own creative team. and for those of you who aren't familiar with Yora for dogs, they have kind of like insect dog food, and they're all about reducing their global paw print by finding additional and alternative sources of protein for pets. And so they were collaborating with not only their attorney, but who were advocates out there on climate initiatives or other areas, and they developed a narrative around the environmental benefits of insect protein with pets. Now we all know that if you try and talk to your friend or neighbor or anyone about, hey, here's the benefits of eating grasshoppers or insects, you're gonna get a crazed look on your face. But what this organization did was that they, by creating kind of a narrative and a short film on kind of the lower carbon footprint of the insect dog foods, that they saw this surge in customer inquiries once they put it out there. The founder positioned as a thought leader, an influencer in the space, and was showing up not only speaking at organizations like this, but was speaking all over the globe. And they saw that they had over 67,000 video views really quickly, and it showed up in about 130 plus articles. So this was a way of where the organization kind of looked at and said, well, we can do something, but what if we create a PR campaign that can actually create a movement around this that'll get that information out there, and we can kind of start talking to people who might be skeptical and find ways to break that idea down. So one of the things that we talk about, with clients and throughout the book, How to Talk to the Other Side, is that there's really 10 key ways to start the conversation with somebody that may be completely disagreeing with you. And we say you can connect on a personal level. You want to listen to what people have to say before you try and be heard. I think that's one of the issues with our organization, or not, excuse me, not with Pet Sustainability Organization, but with kind of this movement, is we're always trying to tell people why they need to take action on climate, to what their skepticism is. When you can empathize with what people are on the other side, that lowers the temperature and lowers the kind of the blockages and the barriers. Often it's not what you say, but it's how you convey it. You never want to say the word you when describing to someone you don't agree with. You've got to acknowledge there's different communication styles. We know that any of you with global brands know that the different communication styles between, say, North America and Europe, or North America and South America, or North America and Asia. And sometimes, I think it's important that you don't assume with what the other person cares about before you start the conversation. And I think, I've been guilty with that. Everyone's been guilty with that. But, you always want to ask people, which method do you use? So you can throw this in the chat box in terms of, when you're reaching to someone who's completely skeptical, or someone that you're thinking is not going to necessarily agree with the point you're trying to make around sustainability. I just want to see what you put in the chat box here and say, which one of these do you use? So to kind of, as we kind of wrap up and go head into Q&A, we have a downloadable worksheet that gives you kind of a step-by-step guide on how to start that difficult conversation. So think of this as, this is the difficult conversation that you want to have with someone within your business or someone within your value chain. It also works with that difficult family member that you just had, if you talked with Zoom on Thanksgiving, or that crazy uncle that we all have when we talk to them at Christmas. Of course, now it'll be virtually, but it works both in a personal context, but more importantly, it works in a business context. And so if you can look and say, have I had to have a difficult conversation, with another, member of my executive team or my board, or how have I, if I'm on a green team, how can I have that difficult conversation with somebody within the organization that seems to be really putting blockages, or really putting barriers to the work that I'm trying to do? Just download this worksheet, and you'll find that you just answer a couple different questions, figure out how you can know somebody, and it'll help you kind of facilitate that conversation. So I just want to, conclude before we get into the Q&A, that this all starts with us. In our next project, our next conversation, your next opportunity, think about ways that you can be making that business case. You can be, reaching out to your suppliers to, that will, in a way that can help you gain that traction. By making that business case, it'll help you address some of those ways to find funds or build coalitions. And, we're all hopeful. 82% of you said we're feeling hopeful today. And that's awesome. And you might be saying to yourself, what can I do? What can my small organization can do? Well, you can lead. and you can inspire businesses throughout your value chain to change the world. And that's what we need right now. We need it in diversity, equity, inclusion. We need it in JEDI, and we certainly need it to try and save our planet right now. So thank you. That's it. We'll also be in the exhibit hall, but to continue conversation after this workshop. But I just wanted to finish with that, and we'll go to Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Kevin. I feel like this is such a critical topic for everyone, right, in our industry and in our households and families. So really appreciate your perspective. We got some great questions coming in the chat box, and please feel free to go ahead and answer, to ask questions as we're going through. So first we had a question, and this one's for me, so I'll just take it, but there's lots for you too, was what can PSC do to help individual champions make the case, right? So sometimes people tune in because this is something they're really passionate about, but they don't have a lot of buy-in from the rest of their company yet. And what I wanted to say is two things. So first of all, the Pet Sustainability Coalition has a toolkit, and that's where Kevin pulled a lot of the case studies that you saw today, in addition to some of the incredible work that they've done. But that toolkit is widely open to the public. We do not lock any of our tools or resources because as a nonprofit, we're committed to giving as many people the tools and resources they need to drive impact. And so in there, in each of our 6 categories of sustainability, there is the 101 business case of, why is this important? And how do I use data to help encourage other people in my company to feel passionately about that? And so I wanted to say everyone can find that in our toolkit. And then for our members, we actually have helped to train individual champions about how to have these conversations and just to practice. What are the kinds of questions I might get? Or how do I really build common ground inside of my company? And so I just wanted to mention that we're absolutely here to help you. You can email us at info@petsustainability.org if you want to learn more about membership or just get access to those tools and resources. And if someone on my team can enter those into the chat box, I'd appreciate that as well. So Kevin, for you, I had a couple of questions.
Great.
So, when we launched the Pet Sustainability Coalition, we were a little bit early, and the pet industry wasn't quite sure about how to adopt sustainability and whether or not my co-founder and I were full of crap, or if this whole thing was really going to work. And consumers do actually care about sustainability. And over the time that we have continued through this industry, we've become much more successful. And part of that has to do with millennials becoming the largest pet owning generation, and so many brands really being successful with sustainability. You showed some amazing financial metrics, Dow Jones sustainability versus the traditional business as well. But my question for you is, I spent a lot of time and energy invested in people who did not agree with sustainability. And years ago, actually the first Impact Unleashed ever, World Wildlife Fund spoke, and they said something really important, which was, you cannot wake someone who's pretending to sleep. Right?
Yeah, right.
And so sometimes I feel like we can invest so much time and energy in people who are never going to change their mind. And so how do we balance, right? Like, how do we focus and spend our energy on people who are going to have an open mind and eventually really be willing to share, what they care about and how sustainability overlaps with that? So how do we know when to invest our time and when to just focus on other people who, are a little more open-minded?
No, that's a great question, Caitlin, and we face that all the time. Advising clients across the globe, and I think that what I tell our clients or tell individuals is that you don't go for the most resistant thing in the world. You go for where you can almost in some ways where you can find common ground to help someone who's there. So I think it's all about not necessarily convincing the most difficult and stargent people, like you said, the person who's the person that's kind of stirring and, kind of, wants to be awake, but maybe client wants to be asleep, and can you help them go back to sleep a little bit and then maybe help them wake up? It's one of those things where I always approach it with, when I talk to someone, who says, and I literally had this conversation with a Fortune 100 investor relations person yesterday. It was like, I don't, this doesn't show up. I don't have analysts ask me this question. I feel like I don't know anything about this. And I feel like this is a huge distraction, waste of my time. So then I just started asking him, and I said, well, I mean, it's got to be a tough year with everything that's going on in the markets and what you've been going on. And he said, yeah, and I'm so understaffed. And now I'm getting all these questionnaires that I've never had to deal with before. And I don't have the time or the ability to answer them. And I said, what are the questionnaires about? And what are they coming through? And they were the exact questionnaires that I put in the presentation. They were sustainability related questionnaires. And so he was resistant. He didn't believe in it, but he was silently kind of acknowledging that he needed help on it. And so I didn't make it about sustainability. I made it about how can we like free up your time so you're not having to be bothered by these questionnaires. Can we help you work with this? Can connect you with your CSR team? And it proved to be an effective way to get past that. And we see this all the time within organizations where if they're a big organization with a large facility footprint, the facilities people, may say, well, don't tell me how to do my job. I don't want some new CSR or sustainability person coming in and tell me how to do my job. But if you start with the conversation of, hey, gosh, if you had a budget of an extra $100,000 and could, work on energy efficiency or reduce waste, what would you do? It totally changes the conversation. And we've had, so many people tell me like, I do all this stuff and it has nothing to do with sustainability. But then they tell you all the different ways that they've saved energy, water, waste, improved processes. And all of that is sustainability, but they've just never thought of it that way. And so I think a lot of it is, when we ask the question, how do you talk and how do you tell someone on the other side? It's like, I usually go and I start with, what does this person care about? And ask them what they're dealing with and what are their problems. If you have some part of the solution, it's kind of that toe in the door methodology to then have the greater conversation. But you can't just go right in with a full conversation right up front. It just kind of overwhelms them and you get resistance.
Yeah, sure. I have to totally agree with you. And we're getting some amazing comments in the chat box of people also answering these questions. And
Yeah.
that's one of the amazing things about the PSC community is we all want to help each other. So I'm just going to quickly also plug the networking forum that's happening later this afternoon so that you can connect with other people in your department and talk about what's working. How are you making the case from your perspective? You've got ROI that you're meant to deliver for your business, and how does this into that? So also really agree on really understanding what people care about, right? So not saying, hey, here's what I care about and I want to share it with you, but really, what is it that inspires the person you're talking to? I've walked around many trade shows in our industry and made the pitch around the business case for sustainability. And what I've learned over time is that that's you have to identify what they care about and
Right.
then show them how sustainability is a part of that conversation,
Yeah.
so that they feel like their voice is heard, that they're a part of the conversation. You're not pushing something on them. You're really inviting them to say, here's how the two things we really care about
Yeah.
interplay with one another in our business. So
And
really appreciate that perspective
and
too.
it's so much about the language you use and even the body language, like you said, of the trade show. I think that, when you like you mentioned, when we started our business, it was all about convincing people and making the business case. And the more I just went and started asking questions and listening, then the pathway forward presented itself. And I think that it's kind of like when you talk to an HR person, it has to be all about, how they're going to attract and retain talent. When you talk to marketing people, it's how are they going to, get more marketing budget and be able to do it. And, so it's all about not only, it's ways where, and Caitlin, be sure to put this in your toolbox. But when we wrote the book, Making Sustainability Stick, we went through and, we had worked with over 100 organizations and we're like, what are the 8 or 10 things we're hearing from each different type of person, department head, what are their blockages and where can you use sustainability to kind of cut through? So a lot of times it's not a business case. And also the type of person you're dealing with, how introverts and extroverts hear information, or if you're an audio learner, if you're a visual learner, if you're somebody who has to look and touch things, if you're someone who has to read it first, all the different ways that people can process the information. So some of it is not just what you're saying, but how you provide the information to them and in the language that they use as opposed to your own language.
Yeah, sure. Really great dialogue today. So I think something that would be really fun to do in the chat box is, can you stump Kevin? So if you can think of one way or one thing that you might hear that you have absolutely no idea how you would address, that you feel like, just makes it really hard to create common ground in conversation, put it in the chat box and we'll see if we can stump Kevin. Just to add some context, Kevin's company is a certified B Corporation. They've been working with sustainable businesses for a long time. I have gone to your books. Sustainability Sticks is a great example. I've had our team read them. We sat down and talked about how to apply much of your expertise and knowledge from being in this space for so long. So really appreciate you taking the time to come here today and to continue to share your wisdom with our team. I hope at some point we'll get a chance to work together more in the future as well. All right, anybody have any Can You Stump Kevin questions that you want to put in the chat box today? Go ahead and enter them. Well, I'll tell you what, there's no Can You Stump Kevin questions, but there's a lot of just praise and appreciation for being willing to tackle this question and to give people tips and remind them that even when things are hard, we can build this common ground together. So just a ton of appreciation. Steffi Volo says, thanks so much for coming out today, Kevin. It was great to meet you. Read your books before. Let's see, got one from... Whoa, sorry, it's really hard to manage the chat box because now there's so many questions coming in.
Right.
Let's see. How do we begin to have this difficult conversation? Sustainability is becoming the issue now. Alternative proteins are moving forward. CNN just posted a video that the #1 solution to climate change is changing our diet. But where do we begin? How do we start the dialogue?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. I'll just give you an example of whoever asked that question. When we were dealing with a general contractor and they said we want to start the conversation around sustainability, their fear was, literally their CEO goes, "You're not going to turn me into one of these lefty, electric vehicle vegan hemp wearing dudes, right? Are you?" That was his initial thing right out of the gate, and. And then my comment was, of course, I'm not going to do that. But then what was the strategy, in terms of what their product could do? And, I think that, you can't go to someone and say, unless they've just recently had a heart attack and you say, you need to become a vegan and only eat insect protein. You got to start by, hey, okay, you're a meat eating carnivore. Like I grew up in the Midwest where, when someone said they're vegetarian, they said, "Oh, okay, but you eat chicken and pork, right?" Because they consider those vegetables as far as they are in Central Ohio. And so, I introduced them to, vegetable protein patties, as alternative sausages. Or I took them to Burger King and said, try the Impossible Whopper. And this is good. And then you start going, well, and then they start going. But I think so often it's kind of like we jump in and we try and like change all their behavior overnight as opposed to trying to change one little thing to kind of open the door. And I think that is, and granted, we need to make big changes massively, but it's just like anything else, I always tell people it's like, when I use a dating example, it's like you don't go up to somebody that you've never met and then go, well, let me tell you all the reasons why you should love me. You got to kind of find your points of commonality first, and where you can kind of have conversations that are fun and engaging, and then go from there. And I think that that's really the key with it, is that if you can start by what does the other person care about, and if we want to make this massive shift to kind of alternative proteins, you got to give them something that they're going to like right off the bat. Because I remember, when I was introduced to a lot of this stuff, it was back before Whole Foods, and, the produce was dirty and had dirt on it because that was truly organic. And you kind of looked at it and you're like, do I want that dirty carrot, or I want the one that's in the bag? I want the one that's in the bag. It just looks cleaner. And this is somebody from sustainability. So you got to, kind of, ease the way in, but have it in a way they're going to have immediate success and kind of immediate benefit. And then they'll say, let's do more of that.
Yeah, I agree. Quick wins are really helpful inside of a business to start to build momentum. Another thing I've learned is when you're trying to build a community inside of your company that shares your passion and drive and want to help the company focus on sustainability, is not just to choose the people who already get it, right? To find kind of those social butterflies of who are the networkers, right? Who are your influencers, whether they understand sustainability or not, and how do you identify those people to bring in too? So you're not, your green team isn't just diehard sustainability people, but it's also those people who build culture and momentum, and already have a group and followers inside the company as well.
Exactly. There's two things that for those of the 10% that said you were on the green team, I said there's types of people that you need to bring in. You need to bring in the cool kids, that the woman or man who's the social butterfly, because they will help socialize it and people want to be around them. I mean, in some ways it's kind of like middle school, but it's true. The second thing is most skeptics on sustainability were people that were just like you 10 years ago that have had their hearts broken. They are skeptical because they've gone, a lot of them, I mean, of course, there's your climate denier who, okay, that's one. But somebody who's going to say, this just won't work. A lot of times it's people who've been there within an organization and have gotten excited about a green team, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago. And then it lost momentum. It lost just the same things that everyone was saying here. It lost traction. There was no budget. There was no money. And so they've had their heart broken. And they're just going to say, we've tried that and this is why it failed. And those are exactly the type of people you need to reach out to and say, why did it fail? Where did you get to? And what was that barrier that you could never really overcome? And how could we overcome that? And so, we often kind of want to run away from the skeptic, but I say, as a green team or certainly your sustainability director, if you can find that skeptic and they can tell you, I mean, we were working with this huge construction company yesterday that was saying, you know, 10, 15 years ago, we were leading and then we thought we were done. And we took our eye off the ball. Now other firms have jumped past us. And so we started going to them like, well, why did that happen? And let's understand why it happened. And let's make sure that we build the processes so it doesn't happen going forward in the future. And so knowing what those skeptics are going to say actually quite helpful, especially as you're getting going on any process, because they'll a lot of times help you identify where the landmines are so that you can avoid them in the first place.
Yeah, sure. All right. Well, if there's any more questions, please feel free to post those in the chat box today. But I think we are going to pretty soon head back over to Melissa. I guess I have one final question. Kevin, you have an amazing perspective both on how to build common ground, but you work with a lot of different businesses to help them become sustainable. So wondering if you could touch on kind of two trends that you're seeing in 2020 and 2021 that people might put on their agenda to consider for their business as well.
Well, obviously, coming off the last session, we all know how important diversity, equity, inclusion has been. That's going to be the issue of 2021. It just is, and everyone's going to have to deal with it. The other thing I would say is that what we've seen the trend certainly in the last 4 to 6 months is that companies like the Microsofts of the world and the big companies that were sending out questionnaires to brands about what they were doing, it used to be that they were fine, you filled it out. Now they're actually starting to enforce it. And now they want to see progress. And we've had this huge uptick just in the last 2 months of customers that are saying to us like, oh my gosh, Walmart and Target and Microsoft, they really want this year. We need to actually get a plan. We've always just been able to kind of answer the questionnaire and move on to next year. Now we need to actually have a vision and goal, and we need to actually do some of this work. And so I think that it was the same thing that we heard in the last session, that there was a feeling that in 2020 that, there was that gut reaction. We all had that first 3 months of, oh my God, the economy is going to crash. Everyone's going to pull back on their sustainability initiatives. I think what's going to happen in 2021 is people are going to lean into them more than ever. And I think that, people are they're feeling hopeful and they want to take action. They've been dying to do something positive. And I think you're going to see a lot more on that in terms of a trend.
All right, thanks. Yeah, early on in the year for PSC at around March, we kind of looked at our model for this year and we said, what are we going to see? And we had thought maybe we would see a decline, and we've ended the year at about 60% growth this year.
Great.
And it's just been an incredible experience to know that
Wonderful.
people are ready. And I think, talking We had no idea. We've always talked about the importance of people, and we know the business benefits of diversity, but we had no idea that it was going to be such an impactful issue that is, in the homes and the communities of all of our member companies. And so we had to pivot. I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier, I don't think I'm even on plan, B or C. I'm on a plan H or I.
Yeah.
And how many times, we've had to pivot this year. But thanks for sharing your insights as to what you see on the horizon, so that our community can prepare for those things as they're starting to imagine, what does 2021 look like for us? What do we want our goals and metrics to be? And I have to agree with you that you can't just respond to assessments anymore. This is happening in the pet industry. For a long time, you just had to say something on your website and that was
Right.
taken as good enough. But the market's changing. People want to see how you're measuring your progress. What metrics can you show over time? What are you focusing on now? And they want a little proof behind those claims. And so really happy here at PSC to help anyone who's on today to understand how they can start tracking, what the most important metrics to track are. And also, the trends we see in pet. The Pet Sustainability Coalition only focuses right here in this industry. And so we're really happy to provide our expertise and seeing what's on the horizon and where to get started and how to progress that too. So Kevin, thanks so much for your time today. I'm going to hand it over to Melissa to queue us up for the next session.